Hey guys, and welcome to one more episode of Builder Nation. For today's scene, we have Tanay Tandon, co-founder and CEO of Athelas, the company building life-changing healthcare products to people around the globe. So welcome Tanay, super happy to have you here. Welcome to Builder Nation.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to chat. I'm co-founder at Athelas. We build software and sensor technology for transitioning healthcare into the home, and also helping doctors digitize their workflows and automate a lot of the work that they do today in a traditional healthcare practice. And so we started the company 6 years ago, and originally the business looked quite different. It was very focused on taking a specific technology, computer vision, and microfluidics, and applying it to do what's called a CBC, or complete blood count, from a patient's home from a very small volume of blood. So our core initial technology was essentially, taking some of the most commonly ordered blood tests that a patient who might be suffering from cancer or an autoimmune disease, or maybe has an infection or just received surgery. In those cases, you want to track a patient on an ongoing basis and see fluctuations or changes in their white blood cell counts, their platelets, their red blood cells, etc. And so when we started the company, we had a prototype of a device. It was literally built in my dorm room at Stanford, and then we hacked on it in Deepika, my co-founder's garage, and then we actually ran our very first clinical trial in Juarez, in Mexico. And it was a small hospital. One of our early founding team members, Peter Navarro, she helped set up the trial and got everything running there. And essentially, like one quick story I love telling because it really summarizes why we built Athelas. During that first trial, we helped identify a case of leukemia that had not been detected before. It was a very serious blood cancer. Our device basically took a bunch of images of the blood sample, and quickly saw there were 30 or 40,000 white blood cells per microliter, which is way higher than normal. Normally, patients have between 5 to 10,000 white blood cells per microliter. And so immediately we knew something was wrong. We flagged it to the nurses, and then 3 weeks later, after they did their normal tests, they confirmed that it indeed was leukemia. And I think that moment for us is when we decided, okay, we're gonna drop out of school, we're gonna go full-time on the company. There's just so many problems to solve in healthcare, everything from diagnostics to the software, how the data was moved around in the health system. And a lot of those ideas are really important parts of what the core Athelas product is today. But yeah, I'll stop there. But I think the spirit of the business is very much the same. How do we help patients using advances in software and devices?
I'm pretty sure that starting your own company, especially since you were, how old were you? Like 20 something?
When we left school, I was 19. Deepika was 21, I think, and so that's when we officially started. Yeah.
Okay, so I have to ask about the challenges. I mean, you were a kid, if we can put it like that. So, how was your first, pitch with investors? Did they take you seriously?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. One of the beauties of the Valley is that if you come with data and you come with technology and you come with hardcore evidence, people at the end of the day, they bet on ideas and they bet on people here, and they don't necessarily bet on pedigree or how old you are, which is really helpful. And I think one other point was when we started the business, there was a lot of noise in the blood diagnostics space. And at the time, we were solely a blood diagnostics company. And so we had to fight through a lot of that noise. And I think the way we did it was just be hyper transparent, share our clinical trial results, share how the technology worked. I actually think the core technology behind our first device is very simple. It uses a technique that's been used for hundreds of years, microscopy, and counting cells, which has been used for over 100 years as a gold standard in pathology. So overall, I think the way that we counted a lot of the challenges associated with our experience just came down to being super upfront about the data and being really focused on the technology.
So I wanted to ask you, how hard it was in order to educate people with the concept of the future of healthcare, that it can be at home.
Definitely. I think the biggest challenges were, I'd divide it into 2 or 3 core kind of stages. The first stage was proving to the FDA that this technology was safe and it was effective. And so it was entirely clinical trials. And we spent the first 2 years of the business entirely on that. From there, once we launched, I think the uptake in the patient community and the doctor community was very natural. And it didn't take a lot of convincing because we would, someone on our sales team would just demo the device, and immediately for a patient that was chronically ill and currently going into a lab for a venous blood test every single week, we were able to replace a subset of their tests there and then. And so it immediately caught fire in a very specific population. I think the challenges that came after were actually not related to the diagnostic and the device itself, but rather how do we solve all the auxiliary problems and all of the other problems that doctors are having? How do we expand our product in a way that truly solves all of the problems that a doctor has? And so a feedback we keep getting from our customers, and we listen to our customers every week, we meet with them every week, was, look, this device is really useful for monitoring maybe 1% or 2% of my patients, but I also have patients that have cardiac problems, or patients that have diabetes, or patients that have other chronic disease. And we need tools to help monitor those populations. And so the very next step was great. We launched a bunch of other devices, some we labeled, some we built ourselves, and expanded into this larger suite of sensors. And I think the big learning for us there was, the more you listen to your customers, the more time you spend with them, the better. It's a very, very high leverage piece of time. And then I'd say the next phase in where the company is now is transitioning into building more and more software tools for these customers around all of the operations that happens after you see a patient. Billing software, submitting insurance claims, collecting revenue, doing prior auths, scheduling appointments. There's so much work that a doctor does manually today that gets in the way of them seeing a patient efficiently. And I think it was the same theme of talk to the customer, spot their problems, ship a solution, and then see if it sticks.
That was actually my next question. Like, how did you come up with this idea of like billing support instead of just focusing on the healthcare problems?
Yeah, I think it was a very interesting decision internally, because I think there's a big business to build exclusively just doing sensors and diagnostics, which is one path we could have taken. I think the fact that we were very methodical in what the core problems were for our customers. And at the end of the day, our mission is the same. We want to transition healthcare into the home, and we want to make it much more preventative. And I think the way to do that is a combination of diagnostics and software. And the core pain point that we heard from our doctors in terms of what was the burning need that they had today all came down to the fact that their billing tools were broken and that their workflow tools internally were broken. And what we started seeing is we would launch our devices across maybe a couple hundred patients in a practice, and immediately the doctor would have so much trouble keeping up with the submission of claims, or keeping up with the scheduling or tracking of the results. And their current tools weren't built for preventative healthcare, and they weren't built for in-home healthcare. And we realized that we have to build those tools, and that's how we expanded into billing, into all of the other operational software that a practice needs as well.
Wow, there comes the importance of finding what your client needs, right? The necessity.
Totally.
Wow, so I think that's incredible. And how many people did you start the company with?
Yeah, so the core founding team was the three of us. It was Deepika and I first, and then Dhruv joined very shortly after. And Dhruv's our CTO today. And so the three of us really were the main kind of group focused on getting this device to end state and getting it cleared by the FDA. And we also had Steve, who was our head of hardware engineering, Louis, who ran microfluidics, Peta, who I mentioned earlier, who ran all of our clinical trials and operations. And so that group of like six people was really the group that got that FDA clearance at the beginning, which was a shockingly small team, I think, for hitting that clearance. And then from there, we expanded as the product suite expanded as well.
And are you planning to expand soon? Are you planning to launch new products? What do you think are the next steps for Athelas?
Yeah, so today we're about like 350 people globally. So it's a much larger team now, and the rate of we've onboarded more customers and more volume in the last quarter than like the last 3 or 4 quarters combined. And so our pace of growth is also quickening. And as a result, we think that there's a lot of interesting applications we're seeing of large language models and artificial intelligence in continuing to automate a lot of the workflows these doctors have, as well as a bunch of new sensors. So we have tests like platelets and hemoglobin, and in-home medication adherence that we hope to launch this year as well, or in the coming quarters. And I think for us, it's about the boring incremental daily work of how do you make a doctor's job a percent easier every single day. And that's really what our product suite looks like.
Great. And I mean, you started the company 6 years ago, you survived the pandemic, but I mean, I'm thinking that probably for you and for this company, it wasn't that you survived the pandemic. I think it was the other way around, right? Because it's a healthcare system. So how was that experience for you?
Yeah, I think the really interesting thing about the pandemic is there were really two crops of healthcare companies that I think got created. One were the ones that most acutely needed to solve the needs of the pandemic. So you had your COVID-19 testing kits, you had your obviously, companies like Moderna and Johnson & Johnson and Pfizer that were able to put together the vaccine response and just massive efforts. And then I think you had the companies that were built around the flaws that COVID exposed about the healthcare system, which were much more long-term or chronic in some ways than just COVID-19 itself. And we made a very intentional bet early on that a lot of people were like, well, why don't you guys launch a COVID test, or why don't you focus on COVID testing? And I think, it was a very important thing to build, but we felt that our advantage and where we could offer the most help to the system was in some of those longer term problems, things like labor shortages and staffing issues, and the fact that doctors spend so much of their time on documentation, or the fact that chronic patients aren't able to be seen for months it takes so long to schedule an appointment in the US. And so for us, COVID was definitely an accelerant because it highlighted those issues in the health system. But where a lot of other companies have kind of dropped off in digital health after the pandemic ended, we've seen our growth continue to accelerate because I think the post-pandemic world continues to have these needs around around healthcare operating system work, around integrating workflows and revenue cycle and obviously remote monitoring.
And one of the last questions, do you think it was hard in order to educate, if we can put it like that, the doctors in order to change the way they proceed with the clients or with the patients?
Yeah, I think as with any industry, you have the early adopters who are very, tech excited and are willing to try something that might have some rough edges, but in the long run will be way better and way more effective for them as customers. And then you have the folks that want to see more, more real life usage. They want more references. And so what we did is, I think, really focused on that early group, the early adopters who were willing to take a bet. And some of those doctors have now been with us for essentially since the device launched in the market 4 years ago. And, those customers they've grown in the sense that their business has improved because of Athelas. Their patients have had better experiences. And so our biggest challenge is not really any one competitor in healthcare per se. It's more that there is this massive legacy system with a lot of inertia in the ways that they currently do things. And our job as an org is to highlight why it can be done in a better way now using Athelas and Athelas' tools. And so most of that just comes down to good demos, showing all the data, being very transparent with where we can help and where we can't help. And then as our customer bases continue to expand, then our customers become our greatest advocates. And that's, I think the goal of any great business.
And the last question, thank you so much, Tanay. Do you have any advice for future entrepreneurs or people starting on this healthcare path?
Our biggest learning at Athelas for Deepika, Dhruv, and me has probably been that, to build anything of significance takes a long time. This was, there were many times I think during the process where in the first 2 years, it might have made more sense to quit because of how hard that FDA clearance was in that initial stage. And then after that, every startup I think goes through like high growth stages and plateaus, and then things that where they figure out a new unlock. And I think for the best companies are the ones that learn how to compound year over year. And even when things are not perfect, they're willing to put their head down and do the work. And so for me, the biggest learning is that in the last 6 years, there have been so many trends and flashes, and you had the crypto swing, and you had COVID, and you had all kinds of industries came and went. But the fact that we stuck with a problem, I think, is what has set us apart, and hopefully will continue to set us apart. So my biggest advice to folks is pick a problem that you're willing to work on for 10 plus years, and then just don't quit, and you'll probably end up winning.
Thank you so much. That was inspiring, I can tell you, not only for the healthcare system, but for entrepreneurs in general. So thank you so much tonight. Thank you so much for joining us, for being here. Do you have any social media handles? Where can people find you? Where can people find Athelas?
Yeah, I think on Twitter, we're at Athelas, that's just Athelas. And we're hiring a lot right now around the world. So shoot me an email. I'm just Tanay, Tanay at Athelas.com. And then my Twitter handle, I don't exactly remember what it is. I think it's just my name. So just like Tanay Tandon. But would love to hear from folks. And like I said, we're hiring a lot right now. So we'd really love to chat with people in engineering, business, ops, etc.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And remember, guys, that you can also find more information, interesting articles, interesting interviews, just like this one, directly on our website, ControlHub.com/builder-nation. We would love to hear from you. And once again, Tanay, thank you so much for being here, for joining us, and for sharing your story.
Of course. Thanks for having me.